Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome officially to Monday. Was it a good weekend?
Okay.
Okay. Did you do anything fun?
No.
No fun stuff.
No.
Just your laundry,
Homework and laundry.
homework, and laundry. Sartaj, did you do anything fun?
Not really. I just shopped some grocery this weekend. Yeah, that's all.
Hmm. Grocery shopping is good. I did some grocery shopping last night. Yeah. Unadi?
I went to Surrey for 2 days after.
For 2 days.
Yeah, one day it was my roommate's birthday, so we were all there till 12. I've never been out in my whole life till 12 alone outside. So
Oh,
that was
like
new.
here, you mean?
Not only here in Nairobi also. I never used to be outside.
Okay.
I mean, like if it was with my family, yeah, but alone no.
Oh,
Yeah.
what was that like?
Different. It was
Yeah?
very different. Like before 12 I'm already asleep, so it was very different.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yesterday I went to get some documents from Surrey, so I was with my cousin for dinner. It was fun.
Okay. Yeah, that's nice. It's nice that you have some family there.
Yeah.
Although it's a little bit of a
Too long.
yeah, they're not super close, but a lot closer than Kenya.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well that sounds like fun. That's all right. Got some independence and some family time and laundry and groceries and exciting. All right. So Jesse's here. Good morning, Jesse. As is Kayla. Kayla's here. Good morning. I'll try to. Good morning.
Okay.
I'll try to remember to say this later, and I do have to put it in Microsoft Teams. I think we should have another quiz on Friday. We have to have 5 quizzes in this class, and this is already week 5, and we've had 1, so we got to pick it up. Okay, so on Friday we'll do a second quiz. We'll probably do another 8 classes, so class 9 to 16 or something like that. But I'll confirm it. I'll put it in Microsoft Teams for you so that you can review that. And on Friday we'll do that. But for in-class people, it's nice because you'll get to sleep in an extra hour. So that's always nice on Friday, isn't it? Silver lining to the quiz, maybe. Yeah, maybe. Okay. We'll do that. Okay. So Eunice, I think, was just asking me about the drill, right? So we're gonna at 1:45 today. Online people, you don't care about this, but at 1:45 today, we're gonna do a hold and secure drill. I think. Let me just confirm before I explain the wrong one. Where's the email from Robin? Here we go. Yes, okay. So it's going to be a hold and secure drill. So there's kind of 2 levels of security here, if you will. So what we'll have later, not today, but later, is we'll have a lockdown drill. So if we ever had a situation where someone dangerous entered the building, we want to make sure that we get all of our students and staff in a safe place really quickly, and then we can call the police, and the police can come and deal with this person, right? So in a lockdown drill, basically, well, that's what we did. Was it last week or the week before? The doors were locked, and we all kind of went into a corner. We didn't do it in this class, but
We didn't go into a corner,
And
so
block-
we just kind of sat and wait for the
okay, don't do that. So in a lockdown drill, what we want to do is make sure that if someone enters the building, basically everybody disappears, right? So that the person doesn't know. Morning, Peter. So that the person doesn't know where anyone is. They can't see anyone. They can't hear anyone, and they're basically just wandering empty halls
in
and
the corner.
what's that? Locked doors. So for us, we're in the corner because then nobody can look through the window and see us.
Oh.
So we always kind of get out of the way, you know.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And, God forbid somebody had a gun, if they shoot through the window or whatever, then you're,
Scary.
yeah. And the odds of that happening are basically 0. But, you want to be ready, right? You want to be prepared. So that's the lockdown drill. Today, we'll do a hold and secure drill. So what that means is that there's no real danger, but we're just going to be safe, right? And it came out of a situation that happened last term where there was a report of a guy with a gun, but like way over. Do you know where Mountain Equipment Co-op is?
Near McDonald's.
I think, it was a little yeah, maybe it was McDonald's or a little bit. Was it McDonald's?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, kind of way over there, right? So there's really no danger to us in the school. We're fine, right? But we do want to basically seal the building, right? Make sure nobody comes in, and then we can kind of continue with our classes, right? There's no need to panic, and again, there was, I think it was resolved, the guy had no gun, right? The police arrested him, he was behaving strangely or something like that, right? That's correct, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
But he was in armor or something.
Oh, okay. He was okay. So yeah, there was no gun. He was arrested. There was no danger to anyone in the school. It's fine, right? But just in case, it's a good idea for us to lock the doors and make sure that nobody gets in, right? Just if we know there's a dangerous person in the area, maybe. So that's what we'll be practicing today. And for you guys, you don't have to do anything. So the doors will be locked. They'll lock the exterior doors, the entrance and exit doors, and then we'll just continue as normal, right? Because there's no danger in the school. There's nothing we need to worry about. We just continue with our lesson, and then when the issue is over, then they'll unlock the doors and everything's fine, right? So there's barely anything we need to do here, but that's what will happen at 1:45. And again, just in case we know of some sort of situation that's happening in the vicinity somewhere, we just lock our doors and then carry on with our lives. Okay? Easy peasy. Again, the odds of something like this happening are basically zero. Nothing, I don't think we've ever had a safety concern like this at the college. Nobody unauthorized has ever come in. So, we're safe and we're fine here, but just in case, it's good to know what to do, right? Okay, so that said, let's go back to, whoops, that's the wrong button. Here we go. Let's go back to what we were talking about on Friday. So Friday we introduced this topic of ableism, right? Where we have people with a disability in society. They experience discrimination. Sometimes they are in an oppressive relationship with able-bodied people. So able-bodied people have power. They create a society that works for them. And for people with disabilities, they often struggle to access the same resources and opportunities as the rest of us, right? And so we said that people with disabilities can be quite varied, right? You can have difficulty with your vision, with your hearing. You can have a mental illness issue. You can have a developmental issue. You can have a brain injury issue. You can have a physical disability. You can be on the autism spectrum. All of these things can put you into this group, and they can affect your life in different ways, right? So if you have a brain injury, that's a disability just like using a wheelchair, but it's a totally different one, right? You have a totally different set of challenges using a wheelchair rather than having a brain injury, right? Those are totally different things. And so it's kind of what's interesting about this group is that they are so diverse, right? And their experiences are going to be so different of society. And that, of course, kind of brings us to, whoops, not that, but our good friend Adam Pearson, right? And so Adam has a disability himself. What's Adam's disability? Not quite. Dis. Yeah. tricky word. Did you catch it, anyone? He has a facial Nope. he has a facial disfigurement.
Oh.
Yes. So Adam has a facial disfigurement, right? And he also has a bit of vision impairment as well, right? Because his eyes are kind of pushed shut by those tumors. You know, he can't see out of one eye, and his speech is a little bit affected as well, right? His lips are pretty big, and so sometimes it's difficult to understand what he's saying because he slurs his words just a little bit, right? Not bad, just a bit. So yeah, Adam has this facial disfigurement, but so that puts him in, in terms of social categories, he's a person with a disability. But what other social categories does he belong to? This Adam Pearson guy. Let's see, social categories. Gender. Yeah, he's a man, right? What about race? White guy, right? What about nationality? Yeah, he's British. Yeah, good. What about religious orientation? What's that? I don't know. What would you, if you had to bet money, what religion would you say that Adam probably belongs to?
Catholic.
Yeah, he's probably a Christian of some sort, right? It would be weird if he was a Muslim, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not impossible, but that would be kind of strange, right? So we don't really know anything about anything about Adam's religion, but he's either Christian or maybe he comes from a Christian background. What about sexuality or sexual orientation? Yeah. Probably. Spoiler alert, we won't really get any indication of Adam's sexuality in the rest of the documentary. Again, he hasn't given us any reason to think one way or the other. It's not really any of our business, of course, but most people are straight, right? So if you had to bet money on something, we can probably bet money that Adam is straight, although we don't know for sure. What about social or economic class?
Middle.
Yeah. What makes you think middle, Eunice?
He's not like, he doesn't look like rich, yeah, because if he was like the one with like money, like he wouldn't care like how much he has to spend. He'd probably get the treatment for his like face already, and he's probably middle because like he still can go on. It's just that he doesn't have enough resources to like I don't know how to say it.
Yeah. Well, we don't really see any evidence of him having lots of money, right? We don't see a fancy car, a fancy house. I think we could agree that he dresses nicely, but it's not Tom Ford suits, right? Like it's, he's just wearing regular clothes. We see his parents, or well, not his parents. We see his mom, right? And his mom doesn't seem to be super wealthy, right? She's just got that little kind of townhouse flat thing. So yeah, I think middle is probably a good guess for Adam. And so, which of those are dominant groups? He's male, dominant or minoritized? Dominant. He's white, dominant or minoritized? Dominant. Christian? Dominant. British nationality in Britain? Dominant. Sexuality, he's straight. Dominant. Interesting. So he's actually, in some ways, he's got a lot of privilege, if you will, right? He has a lot of kind of social power, but of course, belonging to this one minoritized group, is actually going to affect his life quite a bit, right? Especially because his membership in that group is so obvious, right? It is impossible to ignore a face like that, right? And we'll get to his face later, but he can't really hide his membership in that group, right? It's right there. And so how has that kind of affected his life? How do we see people interacting with Adam? And with other people with disabilities too, because he spoke to Lucas, who was the young man at school with the blonde hair. Remember him?
Oh, and the other one who's on a wheelchair.
Yeah, his name. I watched this documentary like 4 times before I remembered his name, but it's Dan, right? The guy in the wheelchair at the club was Dan. So, how do people interact with Adam, or with Dan, or with Lucas? 2 days ago, I know.
I don't know what it is.
Well, what did we see? How do we see people interacting with Adam? He was on the bus. What did we see? Yeah, nobody sat anywhere near him, right? So they had a little hidden camera, right? And he rode the bus around for a while. Nobody sat anywhere near him. How did people interact with him at the club? Yeah, right. So that was that's a difficult one to explain, right? But it was like, yeah, it's like people acted as if he kind of belonged to them, or if they were, his like pet or something like that, and he described it. Adam described it as, I become public property. That's what he said, right? Did you kind of perceive that happening when he went to the club? People were kind of like, the one guy was like, "Oh, I know you. I see you all the time," right? And you don't know this. Like, Adam doesn't know this guy at all, right? He's like, "Oh," and he's hugging him, right? And like, too much, right? Like,
Pretends to be close.
yeah, people, and you see that often with people with disabilities. People will overcompensate, right? They'll either, they'll be super awkward, or they'll be like, so ridiculously nice. It's like, look, man, like, I don't know you, back off, So people will kind of act in strange ways, but yeah, sometimes they'll act as if they're better, right? They'll be acting out their internalized dominance. And we definitely see it with that drunk woman and Dan, right?
Oh, right.
Yeah, what is
She
that?
asked for what's it called?
Yeah, she wanted to do a wheelie.
I don't know what that is.
It's kind of it's a cool move. If you're in a wheelchair, you can kind of like roll up on your back wheels and kind of balance.
Oh.
Yeah, she's like, asking him to do a wheelie, right? What's wrong with that?
He's not a stuntman, like,
Yeah.
just a normal wheelchair.
Well, and even if so, like, do you just walk up to people you don't know and tell them to do something?
Dan probably feels uncomfortable.
I think so, right? What would you say to someone if you were sitting there waiting for the SkyTrain and someone you didn't know walked up to you and said, "Hey, do a handstand"?
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah. What's that?
I would say how much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you're open-minded, right? You're like, okay, maybe. But a lot of people would say, get lost, pal, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not. You don't just walk up to people and tell them what to do, right? But she does. What other things does she say? Do you remember? She said a few other things that were kind of cringeworthy. Edel, do you remember? No? She was saying things like, oh, can't you stand?
Can't you see that he's on a wheelchair?
Yeah, like, I'm sure and no, he's just lazy, right? Like, come on, right? Like, don't say that to this man. Of course he needs to be in the chair, right? And of course he goes on to explain that he's polite, right? He says that he has prosthetic legs in his car, but he says, I don't want to wear them when I'm having a few beers because You know, people lose their balance when they have a few beers, and he doesn't want to be on. Yeah, he doesn't want to be tipsy on prosthetic legs, right? That's pretty dangerous. But yeah, like it's again like it's almost like, you know, part of the internalized dominance thing is that suddenly you feel like you don't have to follow social norms or rules anymore, right? Like you can just walk up to this guy and start telling him what to do, right? And asking him personal questions and, you know, being a jerk, which she is, right? And it seems to be okay, right? And so we see that with Dan and with Adam. People kind of forget this, they forget their manners a little bit, right? They feel that they don't have to follow regular rules. Or they get confused and they're not really sure how to behave when in fact, I know we've only watched half of this, but Adam's a pretty normal guy, right? I mean, his face is certainly very different, but if you closed your eyes, or if you just didn't look at his face for a minute, a regular guy, right? Sounds like a regular guy, you know, dresses like a regular guy. Yeah, he's pretty average, right? He just has this face that is very, very kind of noticeable. Yeah, and how and again, sorry, I may have answered this already, but how do we see Dan kind of deal with that drunk woman? What's his approach?
He tried to be polite.
Yeah, he was being polite.
Humor.
What's that?
With humor.
Yeah, he was using humor, right? He was kind of, you know, trying to joke around a little bit, right? And good morning. And it is interesting, right? Because he didn't really need to do that. Because was she being a jerk?
Yeah.
Yeah, massive, right? She was being awful, and he didn't need to be that. She didn't really deserve that level of politeness. But Dan was polite, right? And he answered her questions, and he joked around a little bit. And then when she finally left, he was like, "Oh my God," right? And he kind of rolled his eyes. But you often see that a lot with people in minoritized groups too. When they have to deal with treatment like this, they kind of are forced to laugh it off, right? Or just be polite, right? Because what do you think so this woman is asking Dan these questions and she's being kind of a jerk. And what if Dan had turned around and said, "You know what, lady? You know, you're being really rude. Why don't you go find someone else to talk to?" Right? What do you think her response might have been? She might have got angry, right? She might have.
She's drunk, so she doesn't realize.
She might have gotten angry, right? What else? How else might she have reacted?
Probably embarrassed and like left or something.
Maybe. I think she should have been embarrassed actually, but.
If she's drunk, I'm pretty sure she'd be shameless because when you're drunk, you don't really like realize.
Yeah, maybe the next morning. Maybe the next morning she's like, "Oh." Do you think she might have said? "Oh, I'm just joking," like,
Yeah.
like why don't you relax,
They
right?
try to laugh it off.
Yeah. Why are three-eyed people so angry? Right? Why are people in wheelchairs always so uptight? Right? So again, for Dan and for other people in minoritized groups, sometimes it's not really worth it for them to confront, right? Because if they stand up and say, "Hey, you're being rude," you know, yeah, they might have to deal with an angry person, or more likely it's like, "Hey, I'm just kidding," right? And then it's like, "Oh, you're the problem," right? You're the one who's uptight, right? You're the three-eyed person who's so angry, or the two-eyed person, sorry, screwed that up. You're the two-eyed person who's so angry all the time, right? And so, you know, for people like Adam, for people like Dan, you know, sometimes the best thing, not the best thing, but sometimes what often gets done is they laugh it off, they use humor, or they just try to be polite, right? Because it's going to be difficult for them to stand up, right? Sorry, that's not a joke toward Dan. Okay, so that brings us back to, so what Adam's going to do here, remember what happened at the beginning is there was a comment on Adam's YouTube page, right? So Adam was in that movie Under the Skin. with Scarlett Johansson, which is kind of cool. And he was being interviewed on, I think it was like breakfast television or something in the UK. He had that interview on his webpage, on his YouTube page, and somebody wrote a nasty comment, right? Do you remember what they wrote?
Like someone would be birth, right?
Yeah, so at the spoiler alert for the movie. Thanks, Adam, by the way, you didn't spoiler alert it for us. But yeah, at the end of the movie, the alien is on fire, right? And somebody says, oh, what happened to that alien should have happened to Adam at birth, right? And so Adam reported that to YouTube, right, and said, hey, I think you've got an offensive comment. You've got you've got hate speech here. And what was YouTube's original response?
But they didn't say that hate speech.
Yeah, they said they reviewed it and they said there's no evidence of hate speech there, right? So what's going to happen here next is that Adam's going to try to follow up on that. He's going to try and sort of move it up the ladder and see if he can get somebody at YouTube or Google to deal with him, okay? So that's kind of where we'll start. And so online people, again, the video link and the questions, these questions are in Microsoft Teams. You'll recall that on Friday we watched the first 20 minutes of it. So let's watch from 20 minutes. Let's watch from 20 to 40. Let's go to 40 minutes. 20 minutes to 40 minutes is what we'll watch. Then we'll take a break and come back and see what questions we can answer, okay? So online people, I'll see you very shortly after 20 more minutes of the documentary and then a quick break. Yeah, we'll see you very shortly. Okay, so we are officially back. Let's talk a little bit about Adam Pearson here and disability hate crimes, because he digs into it, right? He does a bit of a deep dive. He talks to a few people. Yeah, what does he tell us about this? Number 4. So he says someone convicted, this is when he has that little graphic of the fist punching his head. He says someone convicted of assaulting a disabled person will spend less time in prison than someone convicted of assaulting a person based on their race or their religious belief. Why is that?
They don't take it seriously.
It seems like they don't, right? It seems like the courts don't. And so what's happening here? Why do you, well, is the answer in the question for this one? You get less time because that's what the law says, right? The sentencing recommendations are different, right? A hate crime against race or religion, there's a higher recommended sentence. For against a disability, there's a lower one, right? That doesn't really seem fair, though, does it? No, and especially, I don't know what you guys think, but, if you think about, people with disabilities are often less likely to, not less likely, but maybe less able to defend themselves, right? So I'm not saying that, it's not okay to hit people, but when you're talking about hitting people who aren't really capable of defending themselves because they have a physical disability or they have a developmental disability or a mental illness, I mean, I almost think that's worse, right? That you're picking on someone who cannot defend themselves, right? What? Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are more vulnerable, right? And so, to me, it almost seems like they should have more protection, not less, right? But maybe that makes sense, right? Because when Adam went around, on Friday, he went around asking people, "Do you know what disableism is?" Right? And kind of nobody really knew what it was, right? So maybe it's not surprising that the sentencing is a little bit different. What's the issue with how disability hate crimes are prosecuted? There was 3 issues. He went to talk to that former Crown prosecutor and sat down with him, and he explained that there's kind of 3 issues. What are the 3 issues?
The police are shy?
Yep.
Embarrassed?
Yeah.
To ask.
People embarrassed to ask
Yeah.
about disability.
Yeah, the police were too embarrassed to ask about people's disability. Why do you think they would be? Why would they be embarrassed, do you think?
It is awkward. It is awkward.
Why do you think it's awkward?
Because it is not normal.
To be disabled or to ask?
No, the disability of them are normal to them.
Yeah.
That's because like there's something in their parents and then like you cannot give them I don't know like some feeling shape some sort of feeling like this.
Yeah, right. So certainly people the police might be a little embarrassed because the person is different in some way, right? And Adam, for example, is different in a very obvious way. What do you think, though? Like, for you guys, like, what does your culture tell you about disabilities? Because my culture kind of tells me that you're not supposed to ask about it, right? My culture says it's, in terms of social norms, you're not supposed to ask about people's disabilities, and you're kind of supposed to ignore it, right? So if you meet someone in a wheelchair, let's say, you're kind of supposed to just ignore the fact that the person is in the chair, right? And just, pretend it's not there, right? And so, do you find, is that kind of the same in your cultures, or not so much, or? Yeah? Kind of?
We didn't talk about it.
You don't talk about it. Yes. So that's interesting, right? The social norm is to ignore the disability and to not bring it up, right? To not say, "Hey, I notice you're in a wheelchair." You're not supposed to say that, right? You're not supposed to say anything about Adam's face to him because that would be impolite, right? And so here, the police are kind of falling victim to their own socialization, right? Society has told them that you're not supposed to ask about it. So here, when someone comes in to report a crime, the police don't ask about it, right? Because that's how they've been socialized. What happens next? What's the second issue? Police aren't asking about people's disabilities. Then what happens? This is where we get into some legal stuff. Anyone like watching courtroom dramas? Courtroom TV? Not courtroom TV, but TV shows where they're in court?
I mean, but it's all fake.
Huh?
So it's staged and fake. It doesn't.
Like Judge Judy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The disability is not taken as a very
It's not.
it's not taken as a very big crime, so it's not taken to court.
Oh yeah, yeah. So prosecutors aren't bringing it to court, right? So if you've watched your, some of those court things are certainly fake for sure.
There is no conviction given on disability.
Yeah, well, even if they do, but let's rewind up for a second. So the person who's charging someone with a crime is the Crown Prosecutor, right? There, you know how there's the judge and then there's the two lawyers? The Crown Prosecutor is the lawyer for the state, right? For the government. And he's the one, or she, he or she is the one charging the person with a crime, right? And then the other lawyer, the defense lawyer, has to try and prove the person didn't do it. So if the police don't report it as a disability hate crime, sometimes the next step is that the Crown Prosecutor doesn't say that it's a hate crime either, right? So instead of it being a hate crime or a hate-motivated assault, it just winds up being an assault, right? Why do you think that's the case? Why don't Crown Prosecutors charge people with hate crimes when they could, and instead just charge them with a regular assault?
Maybe because, like, in law terms, people who are like disabled understand what it is. Like, they think it might be offensive to disabled people if you tell them that, yeah, you were attacked because you were disabled, not because
Okay,
you were
so almost the same socialization thing, right? They might not want to offend people by labeling this a hate crime or to draw more attention to the fact that the person's disabled. Could be. Why else do you think that Crown Prosecutors might not charge people with a hate crime when they could? Interesting. Often what you'll see, and I'm not saying this is happening here, but often what you'll see with Crown Prosecutors is that they'll charge people with what they think they can convict them on, right? So you could have committed 3 or 4 crimes, let's say, and the police might charge you with 4 crimes, but the Crown Prosecutor will only take you to court for what he thinks he can prove, right? Because if he can't prove it, he or she is going to spend a lot of time in court, and then the person's not going to get convicted, right? So often they will sort of go with a lesser crime because they think they can make it stick, right? So let's see who's going to. Okay, so Unati is going to be charged with a crime, okay? And Unati punched me in the face. Unati punched me in the face, right? And so I'm gonna say I want to press charges. I want her charged, and so the Crown Prosecutor is going to charge Unati with assault. Now, sorry if this is not delicate, but I'm a white person. Unati is a person of color, right? So, could this have been racially motivated? Maybe. But how could we prove such a thing? How could we prove that Unadi punching me in the face was racially motivated?
Or you can ask her.
I could ask her, what are you going to say?
Then you can
Say no. Yeah, so Unadi says no. Can I prove it any other way? Yeah, it's tough, right? And this is what Crown prosecutors often struggle with, is that it's difficult to prove intent, right? We can very easily, we can probably very easily prove that Unadi punched me in the face, because she did it right in the middle of class in front of all of you. Very bold. So we've got a bunch of witnesses. It's on video. We can very easily prove that she punched me in the face, but we can't very easily prove why she did it, right? Was it because of her quiz score? Was it because I'm white? Was it because she just is having a bad day? Is she psychotic? Who knows? I'm just teasing you. I'm so sorry. I'm just trying to make light of this. But intent is tough to prove. And hate crimes are all about why, right? Why did this person get assaulted? Because of their disability. But why is tough to prove? What is easier to prove, right? So it's easier to prove that Unadi punched me in the face than to prove that she did it because I was white, right? And again, if the court, if the judge or the jury, if they don't buy that this is a hate crime and Unadi punched me in the face because I'm white, Unadi might get off. She might be found not guilty, right? And so the prosecutor is going to say, I can prove that she punched him in the face, so that's what I'm going to charge her with. Yes, it might have been a hate crime, but I'm scared I might not be able to win. I'm scared I might not be able to convict her on that. But I can convict her for the assault, and that's what I'm going to charge her with, right? So one of the things that Adam's kind of missing here is that, yes, prosecutors don't point out to the court that this is a hate crime, this was motivated by the person's disability, but sometimes they don't do it because it's really tough to prove, right? And if you can't prove it, the person doesn't go to jail, right? And so, again, they'll often step the charge down a bit just to make sure that they can make it stick, right? That they can convict this person. So I hear what Adam's saying here, but I think it's a little more tricky than that, because you can't, intent is tough to prove, right? Unless you have other evidence. And then the third thing, Zartaj, you were talking about, what was the third thing?
The
So,
quote was like they don't convict disability when crime that seriously to conviction.
yeah. So judges have their hands tied kind of thing, right? Is that they can only really convict people for the charge for what they're charged with, right? So Unadi can, be charged with assault, but the judge can't convict her of murder, right? Because that's not what she's being charged with. So if the person's not being charged with a hate crime, the judge can't convict them of a hate crime, right? They can only convict them for what they're charged with. And so if the police don't mention it in their report and don't ask about it, if the prosecutors don't charge people with a hate crime, then people don't get convicted of hate crimes, right? They get convicted of assault, right? If the police can find them. But, when we were talking to Hayden in the bar, the guy with the hair over his eye, he found that the police weren't that interested in helping him, right? And so the second time he was assaulted, he just didn't report it, right? Because he thought, well, why bother, right? They're not going to do anything. I'm not going to make a fuss. Oh, okay. And last thing here, what kind of stereotypical or prejudiced ideas might have shaped Adam's childhood? And this is the last thing when they were at the theater. What were they talking about outside the movie theater?
People think that the person with disabilities is the bad person or bad-looking person.
Yeah. And we do see that in the movies, do we not? Yeah. How many villains do we know that are disfigured in some way, or scarred, or just really ugly? Quite a few, right? Voldemort, the,
Or
the Joker, Two-Face, Darth Vader, if you get the helmet off, he's kind of a mess under there. Who else? The guy that, I haven't seen it, of course, yet, but the villain in the new James Bond film, he's all scarred, right? Lots of James Bond villains are kind of scarred in some way.
I haven't seen the new movie either.
No, me neither. Who else? Other bad guys that are disfigured or deformed or
I forgot the name.
forgot his name.
Austin Powers.
Oh yeah, the Austin Powers. Austin Powers, because Doctor Evil's got a big scar, right? And then who else? All of the other villains are kind of not very attractive people. But we often see that, right? In the movies that, we use that as evidence of their evilness, right? The evil on the inside is shown by being disfigured or deformed on the outside, right? But how does that stereotype work for Adam, right? People see him on the street and, they might think negative things of him, right? Without even realizing that they're thinking it, right? Because again, we've read stories, we've seen movies, right? And that the hero is always handsome, right? Except for maybe Deadpool. But, well, when the makeup comes off, he's super handsome, right? Ryan Reynolds? Come on, right? The hero is always handsome. The hero is always good looking. The villain is always ugly or deformed or disfigured. And so, yeah, people are going to subconsciously maybe think that, Adam's not a good guy too, just by seeing his face, right? Maybe that's why, do you think that's why people don't sit by him on the bus? Why do you think people don't sit by him on the bus? Maybe he stinks, but probably not.
Maybe some people feel disgusted they see him as someone do not get near
Yeah.
him.
Yeah, what kind of emotions do you think people experience when they see Adam for the first time? When they get on the bus and see him sitting there? What's that? Strange, yeah. They might be shocked or surprised, right? Yeah, his face is certainly quite a bit different from the average face, right? What else do you think they might feel? Gave it away.
What happened?
What?
I feel like they might ask them in their brain,
Sure.
what has happened? So
Yeah,
they're
they might be curious about why his face is the way it is. Yeah, definitely. Think they might be afraid?
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit, right? Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Because there's this stereotype about, about villains and about bad people, and the hero is always beautiful, the villain is always ugly. And so for someone with a facial disfigurement, he has to kind of overcome that stereotype, right? He has to kind of convince people that he's not a bad guy, right? Which most of us don't really have to do, right? Most of us are, well, we're all beautiful in here, let's face it, right? So, but, for most average people, they don't have to convince people that they're not horrible, right? Okay. I'll say one more thing. I was going to say it a little bit later, but we've got 10 minutes left, and we don't have enough time to finish the movie today. So I'll say this, but the other thing that's interesting about Adam and how people react to him also, I think, has to do with being able to read people's face, right? So I think I asked this, I'm not sure if I asked it in this class or not, but I've asked it before. Do you find, because we're all wearing masks nowadays, do you find that you are doing more things with your eyes? Do you feel like you're trying to, like, you know, do a facial expression, but you know people can't see your face, so you're like
Yeah.
moving your eyebrows around and doing all kinds of, do you notice yourself doing that? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, because yeah, like we want to communicate emotions with our face, right? We want to use our face to communicate, and we want to be able to read the faces of others, right? And that's particularly difficult now that everyone is masked, right? It's tough to really know what people are feeling. But look at someone like Adam, right? Because of Adam's condition, his face doesn't really move very much, right? You can see his mouth moving, of course, but does he really, does his face kind of move and kind of express emotion? Not so much, right? Because of his condition, his face kind of just stays the way it is. And so I suggest that that actually might be a little confusing to people as well. Not only is he, you know, very different looking, but he also doesn't really communicate anything about his internal state with his face, right? Because his face really doesn't move. The other thing, of course, is that we often like to look in each other's eyes, right? Are you paying attention to me? Are you listening to me? I can tell if you look, if I make eye contact with you. But can we really see Adam's eyes? Not so much, right? As the skin's kind of puffy around them. And so we can't really, it's tough to make eye contact with Adam, and his face doesn't emote, right? It doesn't kind of express emotions very well, right? And so I wonder if that might be part of it too. He does look different, but also it's difficult to kind of connect with him face to face because, you know, his face doesn't sort of communicate the way that others do, right? So I suggest that that might be part of it as well, right? Part of the reason why people might be uncomfortable with Adam, right? Because it's just difficult to, you know, connect with his emotional state the way that we can when we're face to face with people. Okie dokie. So, quick reminder again, we'll do a quiz on Friday because we need to start doing some quizzes. Do a quiz on Friday. I think it'll be classes 9 to 16, but I'll put it into Microsoft Teams just for the official version. Same kind of drill as last time, so I'll do the online students first and at 8 o'clock, and then in-person students can come in at 9 and write, okay? Any questions, comments, concerns, statements, jokes, funny stories, complaints, criticisms? Okay. So we'll end it there then. I'll come back tomorrow. We will finish the documentary and then kind of move on with some more ableism stuff, okay? So thanks for being here. Happy Monday. I'll see you tomorrow, okay? Okay. Bye.
Bye.